hopefully we can cut that little rant down.
I don't think you should. Well, you've kind of nailed it there.
The Signal. You are listening to The Signal.
The Signal.
Cutting through the noise.
You are listening to The Signal.
Welcome to The Signal, a podcast with a global perspective on media, journalism and technology. Tom is away this week, taking a well-deserved holiday, so it's a slightly different episode of The Signal. It's my chance to have a one-on-one discussion with someone about a subject that we can really get into the detail on. And that lucky person today is Simon Ingram. He's a journalist, an author and former editor at National Geographic. Welcome to The Signal, Simon.
Thank you for having me, Fergus.
Now, I should declare that Simon and I do know each other. We have a professional connection. Tom and I founded a non-profit organisation several years ago called Syli. It's focused on strengthening journalism and helping the media respond to major global challenges around the reporting of the climate crisis. I'm one of Syli's co-executive directors. Tom is one of the other executive directors. And Simon leads our editorial climate work within Syli. It does technically mean that I'm Simon's boss, but for the purposes of this episode, Simon, you can uncharacteristically push back at me on anything that you want to.
You say that, Fergus. I'll be expecting follow-up emails after this conversation telling me off, but I'll take your word for it.
You've got free reign. You've got free reign. So, Simon, it would be great if you could just introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your career journey, and then I'm going to ask you what you do at Syli and a little bit about Climate Exchange.
Sure. Well, I always wanted to be a journalist. So, like many people who always wanted to be journalists, I went and studied something completely different at university. I studied volcano science and earthquake science and tsunami science back in the days where not very many people knew what a tsunami was. And it was exciting. It was thrilling. And then when I came out, I was determined to do something completely different. So I became a journalist, writing about, of all things, mountains.
But when you say completely different, like you just picked it out of a hat?
I think I as my late father would say, as a scientist, I would make a very good fish salesman. In that, it fascinated me as a subject. The breadth and the impact of these phenomenon fascinated me, but I knew that my mind just wasn't built for working in the kind of space that this science required, because it was very speculative, a lot of it. So
Okay.
I thought maybe there was something that I could explore there career-wise.
Okay, so not out of a hat. There was a real reason why you went into it. So you decided to become a journalist.
I did, yeah. And I started off on a mountaineering magazine called Trail, and I was there for a long time. And it was an amazing job. I was paid to go and have adventures in the British Isles, and apart from seeing places and understanding places that most people never got the chance to see, it left you completely in awe of nature and the world that was right on the doorstep. But it also, I was really lucky to work with a team of journalists and visual editors who were really, really talented. And I say that because the mountains don't change. You've really got to dig deep to tell new stories about mountains, because they are nature's great immovables. They don't change on timescales that we can see and we can relate to, unless you're really unlucky. But it really makes you work hard to tell stories in a different way. And my first editor, a guy called Guy Proctor, he was a fantastic writer, and one of the first things that he really ground into me was, don't use the language that people normally use to describe the mountains. Don't describe views as spectacular. Don't describe, ridgelines as magnificent or thrilling. Find new ways to talk about these things, because that's what will make your work have impact. The idea of taking clichés and pruning clichés out of your work became second nature for us. Not using the obvious images, not using the obvious word cadences and placeholder adjectives and things that you use to describe a thing.
And now you're at Syli, and you've worked on something called climate exchange. What is that work? What work do you do with me there?
Well, folks, I like to think that this is where my career has been working all these years. So what we do is we help people cover climate in ways that have impact and resonance with their local audiences. And what do I mean by local audiences? I mean audiences in what many people call the global south, where climate impacts are becoming a part of their daily lives. So what we do at Syli is we work with local newsrooms all around the world. We work with their climate teams, we work with their lifestyle teams, and we find new ways to tell stories that help raise climate literacy amongst these local audiences, wherever they may be, whatever they may be talking about.
What would an example of one of those stories be? What kinds of stories?
So we worked with a newsroom called the Mekong Eye on a story about forced migration due to climate. So people living in the Mekong Delta, they can't make a living off the land because of saltwater intrusion now. So they have to go off and find other jobs away from where they grew up, away from these rural areas. So they go to the cities and they work in factories or they work in sort of urban settings, and they quite often are separated from their families, and that's causing a crisis in education and childcare in these regions. So we worked with Mekong Eye on a story telling the stories of these climate migrants, and we didn't make it a climate story. We made it a story about the regular things that people kind of hit against when they are living a life that is displaced by climate. So, making sure that your working hours tie in with the nursery hours for your children, making sure that you can live a good life in a good apartment, you can afford to pay your phone bills so you can talk to people at home, looking at all these domestic impacts and then relating them back to the reason that they moved in the first place. So immediately you find yourself not just relating to the lives of these people on the other side of the world who might have different circumstances to yours, but you find yourself empathizing with them as well. And they're different things, I think. You're not feeling sorry for them. You're actually you're thinking, I know what it would be like to leave my family behind and go and live somewhere else. I know what it would be like to not have enough money to charge my phone or having a reliable power source to do it. I can understand those very human experiences. And hey, I also understand how climate change relates to it as well and how it's caused these problems. So we're building those links between this really huge, unrelatable global crisis and the domestic problems that people kind of have as a result.
And the whole reason I wanted to get you on to this episode is that you wrote a piece about this, and it was a kind of direct challenge to UK media, even though this is not just a UK problem. You were in the UK, you were consuming UK media, and you were annoyed. So can you just tell me about this piece?
I was annoyed. I was frustrated, I think.
Frustrated. Okay. I think you're a bit annoyed as well. I was going to say something worse, but
it comes back to what I was saying about clichés, right? And working hard to tell a different story. And the thing about the visual grammar of climate change is it's incredibly isolated to a group of very well-worn tropes. And if we backed up a few years, you might see it as polar bears, as protests, as kind of weird graphics of crying Earth and burning planets and all these
and
things.
Shrinking polar ice caps.
And cracked Earth and kind of, all these abstract kind of things that people look at and they say, oh, well, sure, that's climate change. It's stepped back, it's removed, it's something to do with conflict, protest, people getting angry. It's not helpful. It gives people this aesthetic of the story that they then base their judgments on in the future, and that determines how they relate it to their own lives. If you relate that back to kind of what the UK media, some of the UK media, kind of presented to us as the UK heatwave, which we just had a couple of weeks ago, the European heatwave. It's really, really interesting to see what visual kind of identity it gave that heatwave. And what I kind of saw emerging, and what a lot of other people saw, was it's almost like they're picking from 5 or 6 different images. You know, they're picking from somebody with an umbrella. That was a new one this year. Lots of umbrellas, lots of people dancing through fountains, lots of people kind of on the beach.
Yeah.
But you know, I was all getting psyched up to come on this podcast and really slam the media for its treatment. I think, to give it its due, there was a shift this year that I did see, where there was a lot more very relatable tactical stuff, particularly in short form video, of people kind of newsrooms kind of taking a leaf out of news creators' books and having a very personal, very relatable take on how to stay cool.
We would see that kind of narrative as a shift towards climate adaptation rather than just talking about how bad things are getting. This is how to live with this situation, knowing that it's going to be getting worse and this is going to be more frequent.
Correct, yeah, but there was a little discordance sometimes. I think the words are moving quicker than the pictures, because you could see like headlines, UK braces for the 3rd heat wave of the year as temperatures set to hit 38 degrees C. You know, and it's a picture of 2 fellas on a bench eating an ice cream. You know, or it's a packed beach at Southend, or you know,
or a live shot. I saw a 2-way with a reporter at an outdoor swimming pool, with people like splashing around in the background, trying to stay cool in the heat, and you had this picture of kind of joy juxtaposed with life-threatening heat, and actually we know that many people have died in these heat waves. I want to pick up something that you said earlier in our discussion, but also something that you wrote in your piece. You said, "Sell hell and you're a party pooper. Sell joy and you're a tone deaf." But you also said earlier that, you know, when you're describing a mountain, you can't talk about how awesome it is or magnificent, or you can't use language that like that for mountains, even though that's what a lot of people will do in their real life. They go to a mountain, they say it was amazing, it was awe-inspiring, it was tremendous. So you can't sell hell, you can't sell joy. Are there lessons to be learned from how you describe mountains when it comes to describing the impact of climate change on the planet and people, and lessons for media?
I think you've got to find out what matters to people in the terms that they can understand. And what do I mean by that? It's understanding, you know, what really prods audiences all over the world. And this is going to be
what does prod audiences all over the world?
Here we go. You ready? Because this is going to be unpopular. But, you know, climate journalism has traditionally relied on nobility of the audience.
What do you mean?
To do the collective good, to do the right thing for the planet. You know, save the planet. Mm-hmm. It's not about saving the planet. The planet's going to be fine eventually. It's about saving the human. And we need to make people understand, through the means of raising the climate literacy around the world, we need to make people understand that they will get something from this personally, in their wallet, in their health, in their lifestyle, if they behave sustainably. You know, it's not enough to say to someone, you know, give this up and you'll save the planet. Because let's be honest, most people don't care these days. It's a folly to presume that people care about the greater good. So you start with the individual and you start with what makes life better for them, and you build climate literacy into that story. So
what's an example of that? So, because we talk about sustainability, that doesn't mean much to some people. What does sustainability mean? Like what do these big words mean to someone's actual life? What does it mean for their life to be sustainable? And getting back to the media, like what is the responsible way of framing a headline around a heat wave that makes it personal, that makes it makes someone look at their personal sustainability on this planet and their role in fighting climate change, if not for everyone else, but for them?
So you've got to look at those three things, and you've got to combine it with. So you look at people's money, people's finance, people's health and well-being, and the well-being of their loved ones, and people's lifestyle, the things that they love. And then you combine it with a story schema that relies on 3 R's: react, remember, repeat. It depends on how they live and what they do. So, let's say that we've got a heat wave coming in. It's going to be 38 degrees C, and you're writing a story for a local newspaper website. Okay, you have one of your reporters out on the street, and you are maybe around a building site, and then you're talking about the ways that the people working on that building site can avoid heat stroke, or can get through the working day in the most seamless way possible, in the most comfortable way possible. Give them tangible tips to stay comfortable so that they can do their hours, and so that they can do their job well in a hot climate, wearing hot clothes, doing hot work, and then just subtly kind of build in some of the reasons why this is necessary. So immediately you've got a way that someone can get through their day better. They can earn their money in the way that they need to. They can do their particular job, whether it's being a gig rider or working on a building site or being a lollipop man, whatever those things are. And then you write a story based on that, with a little bit of climate kind of sprinkled through, so that people understand how this relates to the global crisis.
Now, what you're saying has made me realize what I get frustrated about. And I get frustrated about the fact that a lot of these things, these elements of storytelling that we give in a UK heatwave, or could give in a UK heatwave, are standard par for the course reporting elements that are happening in other places in the world, particularly in the global south, where rising heat and constant heat waves are a matter of life for people. So the stuff that we're talking about in the West, in Europe, is actually not new. And we're like, oh yeah, we've got a really exciting new way to tell a climate story. Let's put sheets in front of the window, or let's talk about putting shutters as more long-term solutions. Yeah, we could be, if we actually looked outside of our own bubble, we could be looking at the way that climate has been reported, climate adaptations have been reported as a necessity in different parts of the world, rather than thinking that we've come up with something amazing. It means doing something genuinely differently in how you talk about climate coverage. So that's the thing that gets my goat when we talk about these things, and I go off on one frequently about this, but like, people have already done this. People have already, like, we should be building on that, not starting again and getting excited when we think about a way to tell a climate story that's not in front of a beach with people eating ice creams. Sorry, hopefully we can cut that little rant down.
I don't think you should. Well, you've kind of nailed it there. But I think as well, there's work that can be done to kind of give that innovation back to the newsrooms in the global south, because what we have two parts of a puzzle here that sit beautifully together if collaboration is something that we can talk about. And that's something that is front and center in our strategy for Syli, is understanding what is missing from the climate coverage in the global south, because a lot of it is very tactical. It talks about the daily impacts, it talks about the wildfires, it talks about the floods, and the news stories are very focused on getting people through the next 24 hours and just getting through this crisis. And it doesn't have the attribution language, it doesn't have the context within those stories. They kind of jumped over that. They're beyond that now. They're just talking about the impacts. So building in that context, even if it's just a line or two, saying, this wildfire that you're experiencing in South Korea also happened in Japan this year, and also happened in the Western US. And most experts are attributing this to warming temperatures, drying out brushland. Just having that in there is so small, but it's so important, so that those local audiences think, okay, yeah, I get why this is happening to me. I know that I'm going to be angry about this. I can talk to my local politicians. Those local politicians can take it to the government. We can change policy. We can affect change that is really impactful.
Now, because this is a podcast about media and journalism, let's just get back to that for kind of my last questions for you, really, which is we can't deny it has been very hot here. Is extreme weather actually a useful kind of entry point for climate journalism, because audiences can feel it directly as they're reading or watching about it? And then how do individual journalists, reporters, media organizations connect a local weather event to climate change without keeping it local, without kind of overstating what the scientific side of it, because that does tend to turn people off, even though it has to underpin it. What's the way that you can practically do it? And I'm gonna force you to give me some practical examples. So no theory, like someone can do this as because heat is an entry point and it works like this.
Okay, well, to answer the first part of your question, absolutely, it is a useful moment. In fact, it is the only useful moment to do it, is when people are experiencing it right now. Because if you think of climate change as an army that is always in the background and attacks occasionally, it's those attacks that people really pay attention. I do have something to say on it. I think you've got to ask 3 questions of that audience. You've got to ask, who are you going to miss with a conventional weather story? What matters to them? What are the problems that they're going to face? And how do they get their information? Because that is going to tell you how you format the story, what you've got to make the hook of that particular story, whether it's fuel prices, water availability, disruption to working hours, whatever it is, and try and understand exactly the people that you're going to miss with a regular climate story.
What is one familiar piece of climate language that you would retire tomorrow?
I'm going to say sustainability.
Yeah, agree. What does it mean to people?
It doesn't mean anything. It's become that thing that kind of is hey, I'm going to say sustainability because it makes me sound like I'm climate aware and I'm kind of a cool guy. But, when you dig into it, it means lots of different things. So let's not use a word that people can't immediately apply to a specific.
What's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning? What's the ray of sunshine, the kind of piece of hope that you would leave people with in terms of encouraging things you've seen?
I really like the power of the visual to make people want to have a particular way of living. And what I mean by that is if you see somebody doing something that looks aspirational and it's also sustainable, if I see people doing something aspirational through an image that is also a climate responsible, that makes me think, I want to live like that. I want to be that person in that apartment with that cool stuff, living that way. Then suddenly I've been inspired to live sustainably. And I'm seeing more and more of that. I'm seeing companies really selling a whole lifestyle and a whole culture around sustainability in the stuff that they put out, in the marketing, in the way that these stories are told, that kind of make me want to live differently. And I think you can't tell people to live differently. You've got to inspire them to live differently. And I'm seeing more of that thinking coming through the media. Not enough, but when I see it, I recognize it. And that's one of the things that we try and encourage media to do when we deal with them, is to try and sell a dream, sell a lifestyle, not just tell people off or tell people how to live. Make them want it. Really make them want it.
Thank you for coming on and talking to us about this today. I think we could have talked for a lot longer. I didn't even get to ask you about the value of stories where people are trying to fry eggs on pavements or car bonnets. And so there's so much more to talk about. But thank you very much for joining us today. Simon, if people want to know what you've been talking about, learn more about your work and the work that you've been doing with newsrooms in Global Majority, where do they go?
Please check out Climate Exchange's website and LinkedIn feed. If you're on LinkedIn, website is climatexc.org.
Thank you. And thank you for listening to The Signal. For more information on who we are and what we do, as well as what we're thinking about and who we're talking to, subscribe to our newsletter and find us on YouTube. All the details for all of our shows are in the show notes. And we do want to hear from you, so please leave us a comment and share your thoughts and suggestions on The Signal on YouTube, Apple and Spotify. Thanks very much.